My name's Eric Grimson. I have the pleasure of serving as MIT's Chancellor for Academic Advancement. And on behalf of MIT, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you and to thank you for coming together to discuss this important topic, the science of reading. Now, MIT may not be the first place that comes to mind when you think of childhood literacy, since most people associate us with academically high-achieving young men and women. But we hope to change that perception. Today, you'll hear about the many research vectors, both at MIT and elsewhere, that are applicable to learning in general and to childhood literacy in particular. That research builds directly upon values and a mindset that's prevalent at MIT. First, MIT's motto, mens et manus, mind and hand, describes our imperative not only to push the boundaries of research and to discover new knowledge, but also to seek applications of such knowledge to make a difference in the world, whether in health, in environment, in energy, in understanding intelligence, or in education. Second, interdisciplinary approaches to problem solving, creating opportunities for researchers at the interfaces of research areas to interact, and through such intellectual friction to catalyze fresh new solutions, run through every part of the Institute. We see this in our policy to let a graduate student to be supervised by any faculty member in any department at MIT. In our design of spaces to encourage interdisciplinary friction. In our engagement of our undergraduate students in cutting-edge, meaningful research. And frankly, in the boldness and curiosity of our faculty to cross disciplinary boundaries. Third, an openness to engaging strong partners to join us in iterating on big challenges pervades our research perspectives. MIT does not have a school of education, or a school of law, or a school of medicine. We borrow Harvards whenever we need them. And that helps us free our faculty and our departments, in fact, to form deep partnerships with other institutions in Boston and beyond, leveraging complementary competencies and opening doors to practical solutions. Fourth, our belief that every part of the Institute can help foster a solution to global challenges broadens our perspective. We don't just create new technologies to tackle educational challenges, though we do, like our PK-12 initiatives in hands-on STEM learning. We don't just explore fundamental breakthroughs in the science of learning, though we do, like our work on detecting structural differences in brains that track with a specific predictor of dyslexia. But we also tackle the social and economic issues of learning, like our work in assessing the effectiveness of school choice programs. Today, you'll hear not just about cutting-edge cognitive science and neurobiology research from our faculty, students, and postdocs, but you'll also gain insights into teaching and learning from those in the classroom and other environments. As I said at MIT, we deeply value the interaction of people who come at problems from different angles. And so in addition to some compelling presentations in these and other areas, we've set aside time for you to make new connections and build your own networks. Today's event is co-sponsored by MIT's Integrative Learning Initiative and by the McGovern Institute for Brain Research. As many of you know, at the McGovern Institute, scientists are studying everything from how the infant brain develops in the earliest weeks of life to how neuroscience can more effectively help tailor interventions for children with learning challenges. In the MIT Integrated Learning Initiative, or MITLE, and John, you have to tell me how hard you worked to create that acronym because it's wonderful. MITLE is an interdisciplinary effort applying scientific rigor to understand how people learn best so that we can use those lessons to benefit students both here on campus and also through digital offerings, teacher training, and other outreach to benefit learners of all ages around the world. John Gabrielli, the Grover Herman Professor of Health Sciences and Technology and Cognitive Neuroscience, has led MITLE since its establishment, and John will be your guide today. John, I turn it over to you.
Well, I thank Eric for welcoming you to MIT. It's a privilege for me to be on the faculty of MIT. It's a privilege for me to be with you this afternoon. I want to thank a few notes of thanks and then talk to you about the charge for the day from my perspective. So I want to thank the MIT Integrated Learning Initiative and the McGovern Institute for organizing this event. For those of you who've organized events like this, you may know how much work goes into doing this to make such a wonderful event that we can all share in. And I want to thank the individuals who did the hard work of putting this together. Cara Fligg, if she's here, she might be doing something. Steve Nelson. I don't see, yeah. Thank you. Megan Mafucci. You have to put up your hand so we know who to. Catherine Nunciata, Tom Smith, Sabi Lal, and Julie Pryor. So they did all the hard work to make this a wonderful event for all of us. And I really want to thank the speakers who came here and you for coming here. This is an amazing gathering of people with very different perspectives, backgrounds, and interests, but we share one thing: we want all children to flourish. And we know that reading is such a big part of that, and we want to make more children flourish than is currently occurring. So here's the two questions I think that will guide us through thinking through the day. Why has it been so hard to improve reading outcomes for children? There's a lot of science, there's a lot of efforts, there's a lot of thought, there's a lot of passion. This room is full of it. But why is it that we have not been able to move the needle as much as we think we should have been able to do it for so many children? And then, what can we do to improve those outcomes for children? Not just complaining about the difficulties, but thinking hard about what is it that we can practically do to make a difference. So I hardly need to remind you, but I'll just do it so we're on the same page, that reading is essential for learning and education. It's a portal for knowledge in all areas of science and learning and history and so on. There's a phrase you hear a lot, that the first few grades in school are learning to read, and then the subsequent rest of your education and adult life is reading to learn. There's a beautiful quote from the amazing Frederick Douglass, who wrote that once you learn to read, you will be free forever. It's a portal to knowledge of citizenship and independent agency. It's also, we know, the first great educational experience for children. They arrive at school, and their biggest first experience is reading. And we ask that of teachers in schools to help prepare children to read. But if it turns out to be difficult for one reason or another, that's a big burden to put on small shoulders of children. And that's when the children are growing their first sense in school and education, their sense of self, what kind of learners they are, what kind of people they are, what kind of agency they have, how much can they influence their own futures and make their own way. So if reading is a challenge, a burden, unexpectedly in various ways, we're touching children's social and emotional core, we're touching their spirit for the future. So these things are wrapped together in very fundamental ways. And despite that everybody in education and research thinks that reading is so important, by many objective criteria, we've had relatively little systematic progress over many years. And you'll hear discussions about this, and you can debate it in some ways, but I think overall the evidence is very little systematic progress. Achievement gaps based on socioeconomic status, race, and ethnicity persist. The approximately 1 out of 10 children with dyslexia still struggle in many ways and are ill-served in many ways by the school systems we now have, despite many people in this room and elsewhere who care so much about them. And my colleague Nadine, Gab, and I talk about this wait-to-fail model, this waiting for children to be so far behind, to be so miserable in their progress, that that's the moment that schools start to act. And there's many complicated reasons why, economic, social, political, these things happen the way they do, but we know we can do better. And there's concerns. How do we help teachers in preparation, and how do we support them to effectively teach reading to students? In biomedical research, half of my life is in biomedical research, separate from neurodevelopmental differences. And there they talk about a valley of death. You might have heard this phrase, between basic research and clinical application, the path from basic science to the helping a patient at the bedside. And we can talk about that in education as well. Is there a valley of death? Do we have a gap between what we know and how we communicate it and share it and use it to help teachers and students and parents do the best they can? So these are all concerns we have, but really what we want to do is share experience today and insights. This is an amazing audience. I feel like we could have 3 programs over just rotating who's speaking and who's sitting out there, because there's people who are so knowledgeable, so expert, so passionate, with very different voices, perspectives, and we want to hear all of your voices today if possible. So there's relatively brief talks, relatively interactive panels, very brief research talks. It's painful for us not to have 100 slides to show you. That's our habit. But we're not going to do that. We're going to have overwhelmingly just relatively brief talks and conversations and invite you to participate. We want to hear your voice because we want new partnerships and a growth of a community amongst us to see if we can do better working together than we have so far. And even at the end of the day for the reception, you'll see social robots who might be replacing us all in a few years. So it's fascinating to think how technology might enable improvements. We worry about technology in terms of literacy, but there's also tremendous opportunities with technology. So our top goal is to get everybody talking with each other in small ways and big ways, during breaks, during panels, during, in question periods after the somewhat longer talks. We really want to hear your voices today as much as possible and find ways for us to discover new partners, new alliances, new perspectives that we have not had before.